look cute, and get down. What are you doing? Down. Thank you. You're such a boo. All right, apparently no one is more eager to get started today than Prometheus. But welcome back to episode 8 of the Simple Jargon podcast. I'm not sure what's on the agenda today, but Peter's going to fill us in. So what's going on in the world?
Well,
I do have one thing I would like to discuss.
Okay.
But I want to see what you had on your agenda, and then we can talk about the thing that I'd thought of.
Oh, okay.
Suspense.
Well, given this is a, January 6th anniversary of the protests that happened, following the election, I thought maybe we talk a little bit about that. And, it's just so interesting to listen, many people lately on different alternative media, including Tucker Carlson, that really had lots of witnesses he talked to that were actually involved in, protecting the Capitol, and many other speakers. And they seem to all come to the same conclusion that first, it was not insurrection, it was just a riot or protests, again, what was going on. They came to clear conclusion that President Trump had to do nothing to do with it. And also, many of them, keep talking about that some of those strange things that happened with that whole event that kind of suggest that it kind of might be staged, or kind of incited, so they can make it bigger than it, that it was, so they can use it, against the, President Trump and, the Republican Party. And, it's very sad because President Biden just had a speech a couple of days ago, I believe, when he was like really boasting about how they cracked down on the January 6th protesters. There was like 1,000 of them convicted or something for combined 840 years in prison,
Yeah.
and how they, prosecute them with all sorts of things. They kind of imposing on them like a no-fly list and so on, and it kind of makes you very sad to think how many innocent people just for, try to, voice their opinion are being so heavily prosecuted. Like there's no example for it in except if you go to like Guatemala, or Nicaragua, or those, countries when those political prisoners were literally tortured. Well, what's happening to those people is really torture. It's sad.
It's going to set a precedent that even when you do want to make a political statement and protest or anything like that, that you're also going to include in that whole process looting an Apple store, so that you'll get labeled as peaceful protesters rather than insurrectionists. Sorry, that was... Sometimes my jokes land with you, and other times you just stare at the screen like, huh? But in all seriousness, yeah, no, I saw that speech, and it's a lot more of that grandstanding. And I think it was around this time last year that they had another big foible, as it were, when... what was it even? Was it the State of the Union address last year or something where
I had like those, it looked so, it looked so banners, staged.
Yeah, it was like, but not just like super staged, but also like eliciting kind of
Hunger Games, like
kind of, but almost like last year it was. And I'm someone, if anyone watches this, someone's gonna say like I'm making a straw man out of this, but I'm not using this to elicit like the reactions most of people on the left are. But when you think of like the grand speeches of big fascist dictators like Mussolini, Hitler, or even the big communist dictators like Stalin, you had this like this kind of like ostentatious show of force even when you're just having a regular speech. So it's not that you have banners that just have the flag on it. It's that those banners are then blacklit with like a dark red light. Like it's those kinds of elements that are added to a stage that kind of like elicits kind of a more of an authoritarian show of force. And that's something that they did last year with this thing that they were called out on. And I might not be articulating really, really well. In the editing room, I'll show at least a picture of what this looked like to kind of, or you could also think of like the Empire in Star Wars, right? It's
Yes,
that kind
exactly.
of, you're like, you have that feel, or you would think that this kind of thing would be something that takes place in like North Korea. Anyway,
Yes.
not to
I mean,
belabor
that's
that point,
that's an
but
excellent
this
point. Yeah.
speech, the speech that I remember seeing clips of that you're talking about was done similarly. Aesthetically, they didn't go the wrong direction this time. They didn't put red backlit banners behind him or anything like that. But it was that like he was obviously instructed, or the intention behind the speech was for him to get like really angry at certain points and really yell and condemn those people. That kind of like stuff during that speech that, one, you don't really think of Biden when you think of that kind of behavior. It's obviously being put on because the, just watch any clips of the guy normally and he wouldn't have the wherewithal to kind of put on that kind of show. And yet now they're having some kind of January 6th speech and he really needs to condemn all those people and make it seem like they've done the right thing in removing the freedoms from all of these people. Removing the typical process for conviction, being found guilty in a court of law prior to anything else. Like all that stuff is kind of gone, and we're going to glaze over that by making it seem like all of the things that's happening to these people is justified, and we're going to rant and rave about it from the podium. And that's what I got from it. So it's like every year they kind of end up showing their true self a little bit. This party that wants to come off as like the people's party, but when you look at it, they really are just trying to consolidate power. And here again, I'm not necessarily saying Democrats. I'm saying the establishment, because this might be something else that you want to talk about today, but I'd be as terrified if Nikki Haley gets into power, right? For the same reason. Like I don't think there's a huge departure from those two things. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah. So what was your impression of that speech?
That's kind of what I have pretty much have the same impression. What makes me more, just I keep thinking about those people because I just cannot believe there is such a little push, to fight for them. Like there was a time when that Marjorie Taylor Greene and there was a few other politicians that tried to really, visit them in a prison and some kind of help them, and but seem to be lately I don't hear any efforts to help those people. And the only person that are doing it lately was some of the like Tucker Carlson and some of those people on the podcasts and some of the alternative medias that keep bringing it up. Um, but among the mainstream media, there is a total blackout, and that doesn't seem to be that from the legal point of view. There is nothing that can be really done for them, which kind of feels so strange that with all the discoveries that are happening now with the the release of the tapes and testimony, many of the people that were the Capitol officers and stuff that that still that can be going on. It's just hard to believe. It kind of gives me chills almost at the time, thinking every time you think you're in a country when you have some kind of rights and freedom, you just find out that can be so easily taken away from you, just like this.
Like yeah. The it's one of those, like, it's going to be one of those watershed moments, or there's going to be a real domino effect when a lot of these cases do get to the point where they're seen by an appellate court or potentially the Supreme Court, and to make a general ruling on a lot of the loopholes that legally had been used to justify holding these people without real cause and without proper due process and all these kinds of things. Like right now, from a legal standpoint, it's really frustrating for those of us who are looking at it like this just seems like such an obvious injustice. How come someone can't step in? And I think a lot of the reason is because it's tied up in a lot of very specific loopholes that prosecutors and the federal government have been using to justify holding these people for long periods of time. And eventually, when one of those cases or a group of those cases gets seen by the Supreme Court, and they kind of go, well, now we have to make a judgment constitutionally on something in this, there's going to be that like watershed domino moment where then suddenly all of them are going to fall apart because they're all kind of based on the same thing, the same principles, right? I know I'm not defining things very well, and it's because I haven't really done a lot of research as to what the loopholes are, but I do have a good understanding that's largely what's happening is the government has found loophole after loophole after loophole. They'll say one thing to the media about these people are being held for insurrection, but then on the actual paperwork, they're being held for something else, like some other ambiguous thing that allows the government to just kind of hold them constantly, but then being framed both before they're seen in court. So do they have like a legitimate unbiased court when they get there? No, because they're already being lambasted in the media as these insurrectionists anyway. But I just want to like, it would be nice if more professionals were doing something about it. But I would just point out that I think one negative that's happening to a big chunk of the population right now is that on issues like this, they see that there is an obvious solution and they're kind of putting all their cards into that, or all their, whatever the expression is, their ducks into one basket, you know? And that's Trump. Trump has made it very, very clear that if he's elected day one, they're all pardoned. Like, he's made it very, very clear. So I think that gives an easy out for a lot of people in the voting base, not professionals in power that could do something, like lawyers that could file specific lawsuits or politicians that could move things in one direction or the other. But I think the general population, we're just kind of going, well, there's not a point in like sending a lot of money to some fund to try and help them or to do this or to do that, because if we just get Trump elected, this all goes away anyway. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing for the Trump campaign to focus on that. I'm not saying he's a bad guy for saying that outright and giving hope to a lot of people that could happen. I'm just saying that's the consequence of it. I don't think there's a lot of pressure from us, the general people, to those politicians to do something, because a lot of people are just seeing like it's so close. If we can just get Trump elected, problem solved. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Anyway, that's just my thoughts on it, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I have the same impression. Or Vivek also said, he would, free all, all those people that peacefully protested at the January 6th.
Yeah, but he's not going to be president, is he?
And yes, it's very interesting because, I think we talked about it, that, he himself now claims, very clearly about how, and other people now, they see this new path emerging, that definitely, Biden is not even, potential candidate, really. I don't know why he's still even in there, but the only reason might be in there is, what Tucker Carlson and Vivek and other now talking about is there's a new plan. And plan is, they all seem to agree that they will do anything and they will find a way to disqualify Trump. Even if they have to kill him, they will do something to not allow him to, run and win the presidency. And the backup plan for them seems to be, for establishment, is to, put a Nikki Haley in power, which would serve them the same like President Biden. There's no difference between him and, they just want somebody in the power they can control. And just us talking about it and other people talking about it, kind of is shocking that we have such a little trust in the election system, actually. We're not even talking about people going to vote for somebody. Everybody's talking about who the establishment is going to put in. Isn't that kind of bizarre in some ways?
Like the fact that something so egregious as it being planned who's going to run the country can go mentioned so loosely, for lack of a better term, that it's so easy for us to acknowledge that that's, even if it seems a little conspiratorial to say it, like the general population can kind of look at it and be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, it makes sense that's just the person being shoehorned in. Sorry, Atlas clearly just had a little fall.
Okay, do you need to
So there was
check
a
on
bump,
him or?
and then it's, no, he's got a mom. He's got a mom for a reason. She'll take good care of him. The crying stopped
Okay.
already, so
All right.
it was probably
So-
nothing. It was probably a toy that hit the ground more than anything. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted that. Lost my train of thought.
Right. Well, the only good thing about it is that looks like that Trump is going to be on a ballot in Colorado. Now they certify it, so he's going to be on ballot. So that it was kind of just maneuvering that they're trying to do. Now, what's more interesting about it, Alistair, is that I was just seeing that the Democratic Party has now filed lawsuit against about 160 different elected officials and different positions using the same clause like with Trump to try to get them out of power.
So, like,
I mean, yeah,
we talked about this.
The Article 14, 160 people. It's just different parts of the government. It's just insane.
We talked about that kind of a couple of episodes ago, that we were talking about it in the context of both parties doing it. But it's just another example, kind of highlights what we were talking about before, that politicians just have this like innate ability for some reason to see the actions that they're doing as okay, when the exact same actions done by their counterparts they see as horrific, unconstitutional, anti-democratic, da 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 da. And both sides do it. It's like, so one side will point at, I get what I'm trying to say is, and I know this example is just the Democratic Party now doing it to a different rung of Republicans, but I won't be surprised, or don't hold your breath very long, because there's undoubtedly going to be a pushback where then Republicans do the same thing to Democratic representatives.
Right.
Do you get what I'm saying? Like, as soon as one side starts doing it, the other side says, oh, how unconstitutional and anti-democratic. We're going to do the same thing. And I don't see how you can't see. Like, if you don't have some kind of principle somewhere, this comes back to those like bullies in the schoolyard. It just seems so petulant that they kind of keep going at each other. Oh, it didn't work with them. Oh, well, we're going to go after these other people with the same principle until someone really tells us to stop, and then we'll find some other way to get someone in a noogie and give them a, Anyway,
I almost wish that Will Ferrell, would make follow up that movie, like in part 2 or something, at some few new gigs.
Yeah.
To it.
Without having to generalize too much, though, Will Ferrell is definitely a Hollywood guy. So I'm not sure that movie would come out the way you wanted to in today's political climate.
That's true. Yeah.
It's fine. The man might be funny, but
yeah. Now you said something you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so I don't know if you caught it. I watched it, and I guess that it probably would have been better for me to maybe send you the link, have you watch it before we got on, or at least maybe plan to be able to share it and watch a clip of it. But I wouldn't know exactly where in the 55-minute interview it happened. But Vivek, there's a YouTuber that was originally based out of Montreal that I think you know who it is, but I followed for a couple of years. It's Viva Frei. He was a lawyer out of Montreal. He got really, really popular during the trucker convoy and those kinds of things. He kind of already had a bit of a following, but right. And I haven't watched as much of his content lately, just because it's just a time consumption and those kinds of things. But I do really like the guy. I think I also like him because he kind of goes out of his way knowing that he doesn't necessarily know all the answers, and he's kind of like a Joe Rogan, and he's willing to enter into a conversation and a discussion where he knows that he's not going to be the expert and he may not know all the answers, but he just wants to have the discussion. And anyway, I was watching a couple of clips from him recently that was kind of getting me back into his content, and then I saw, boom, he has an interview with Vivek. So I said, awesome, this will be good, because this is a YouTuber. He now lives in Florida. He's escaped Canada, but he tends to have opinions that I kind of really, really appreciate, or his line of questioning really seems to be genuine. So they're talking, and eventually...
So I'm sitting here editing, and I'm realizing my millennial moment. I knew it was possible, and I technically knew how to do it. I just forgot a couple of steps in that exact moment. And when I shared the video and watched it with Peter, no audio from anybody or the video. So I'm just going to put the clip in here. And again, credit to Viva. Awesome interview. Great video. You guys should go check out his channel. If anyone is watching this and you guys don't know who he is for some reason, then yeah, go check out his channel. But yeah, I'm just going to put that in real quick so you guys have context of what we're talking about, because it's important, at least in relation to this conversation. Thank you.
Have you ever contemplated or talked about dual citizenship members of government in America? I'm not sure if you ever discussed that.
I've never discussed that, but what I've never discussed that as a policy theme or whatever. But when I've been asked about this in the campaign trail, it's actually in a very different context that it came up. I don't think dual citizenship is a thing. It's not a coherent concept. It doesn't exist. I know it exists in the law, but I'm saying if you think about what citizenship is about pledging allegiance to a nation. That's what citizenship is about. See, everybody thinks about the question of citizenship of, what do I get? Maybe it's the right to vote. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. Well, actually, women were citizens for as long as our nation has existed, but they didn't have voting rights until far into our national history. And so if you go to the root cause of what is citizenship about, it's not about what you get. It's about the duty that you owe. It's about what you give. And citizenship is fundamentally, even if you look about the naturalization process of citizens who become naturalized citizens, of immigrants who become naturalized citizens, it's about the oath of allegiance that they swear to the United States. And so I don't think dual citizenship is coherent. It's an oxymoron. It is a contradiction in terms unto itself. And so I don't believe in dual citizenship, and I don't think the United States should either at any level of our government and even of our citizenry. And so I'm a little bit of a hardliner on this, but I think if you're a citizen of this nation, you're a citizen of solely this nation. And yes, then you have all of the privileges and immunities and rights, including the right to vote, that come with citizenship. But to me, dual citizenship is not a coherent concept. It doesn't make sense because citizenship itself is about allegiance to one nation, whether that's...
Okay, perfect. All right. So, sorry to have interrupted it like that. I'll be better planned next time so that the audio actually works, and this can be something we more include in the podcast. But what are your initial thoughts on that take? Before, I have lots that I want to say, but
Fear?
What's your reaction to Vivek's take?
Fear, because they again take something away from you, and that kind of scares me. I ultimately think we're not citizens of the nation. We should be really citizens of the planet. All these nations and all these borders and all these, things are artificial made things that, just keep causing wars and conflicts, and always think of the other country as your enemy, rather thinking of this planet as we are citizens of this planet, and can we find a way to govern it together, under the same rules and the same agreements and same advantages for all the people. Not like we have now that, You can, in the United States, you need $6,000 to $7,000 to survive a month. And in Bangladesh, you probably need $200 a month. It just doesn't, it just creates such inequalities and problems on every level in the system. And so it kind of scares me a little bit what he said. I just cannot believe that suddenly it's even an issue for him. So that's kind of the first thing that comes for me. And obviously something's coming up for you.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the entire context of why Viva was bringing that question up. I'm not sure if this is something that has shown up in other media outlets, or if people have been asking this question, or what, or if there was an incident that pertains to it. That I'm not sure. I was just watching this interview and Viva asked that particular question, and then to hear that response from Vivek was startling, and I will also say a little scary, but also in many ways not surprising. And this comes to the large disagreement that I'm going to have with most people who identify as libertarian, because of the in my opinion, maybe I should just say it the way I want to say it so we do get attacked. Thank you guys for the engagement. For some reason, what I see in what people in the libertarian movement is this ability to arbitrarily define a line where you're not going to apply your same standard of epistemology and metaphysics, or your understanding of the universe only goes to a certain point, and then you kind of stop asking questions. I know I'm super generalizing here, but the reason why we seem to agree largely with libertarians is because libertarians seem to approach why you should be capitalist from a very pragmatic standpoint, where an objectivist wants to approach the politics of capitalism from a very logical progression in the thought process of philosophy that gets you to where, okay, if I understand that this is the nature of man, and this is how I understand the world around me, and this is how I use reason to better my life, and okay, now we get to the point where we discuss how should individuals interact in a social setting, and then we determine, okay, capitalism recognizes all the natural rights that man has, and then we proceed on that conversation. Where a libertarian sees that capitalism has been the most effective, most beneficial in like a hedonistic viewpoint of like it does the best for people. That's why we should support capitalism. There's not like a fundamental like moral philosophy that backs why they would back those kinds of things. And the reason I'm generalizing about this so much is because in not having a verifiable, checked way that you can come to that conclusion, it allows for these really weird ideas to permeate your worldview. And this is an example of it. When we listen to Vivek speak, 98% of the time we're listening to him speak, you and I go, this guy gets it. Like, this guy understands what it's like. This guy understands like the importance of the individual and the importance that the founding fathers placed in the rights that we enshrined in our Constitution and all those kinds of things. We're like, yes, 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 yes. And then he has a viewpoint like this that is so anti-American. Like, if you take exactly what he just said, then every single one of our founding fathers were wrong, because they were already citizens of the British Empire. They had a duty and an obligation. How dare they go against it? Like, this idea that your citizenship inherently applies a duty or an obligation is the definition of altruism. Right. And it cannot live in the same world as a truly capitalist system, because it is forced compassion. It's the idea that like you owe something in order to get your rights. It's worded weirdly for an atheist to say, but the Declaration of Independence is very, very clear. These are our God-given, inalienable rights. I don't have these rights because I swear an allegiance to the United States, or because I'm gonna make myself go into the military, or because I'm obligated to do any specific thing. The idea was that as an American, I have those rights. The government's job is to make sure those rights are protected. Then everything else is about my voluntary exchange as an individual with other individuals. End of story. This idea that there's an obligation that citizenship implies is... I'm just getting angry thinking about it. And it's weird because I love Vivek. I love the guy so much. But like, how can you talk about all of these things that seem to come from a principled point of view, and then suddenly you just, dual citizenship is total bullshit. It shouldn't exist. It's so antithetical to the idea of citizenship. And I'm just listening to it going, like, excuse me?
Yes.
Well, what if I am an American and I love America, but I also love the climate in Costa Rica, and I want to spend a lot of my time there, and then I want property there, and there's like, excuse me, Vivek, how dare you say that I have to now, if I want to enjoy the rights that you're telling me in America provides me, enjoy the, like, it was the wording that he has. It's like, these rights are only given to you by the government because you're blessed with it, blah 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 blah, and you can go somewhere else if you don't like it.
Yes, it was shocking. I'm
not articulating my points at all anymore now. I'm just angry. I don't understand how you can have that.
There was a couple of times you really made a good point. I really like how you made those points, and I think it's now two issues that we seem to have, with Vivek, and one of them is this issue, and then of course his kind of stance, what's going on in that whole Israeli conflict. Not him to be willing to.
I've softened on that. Sorry to interrupt, but that's like, you're right. That was what when I was thinking. There was this thing that I watched Vivek. Oh, it must have to do with Gaza, and then it ended up being this dual citizenship thing. That was like that was the thing that got stuck in my craw. But in the same interview, he does talk a little bit more about Gaza, and he kind of seems to take a little bit of a backstep. That he's like, oh, I really want to support Israel. I want to support their right, but no, America should not be involved. Not in one little bit. They just shouldn't be involved at all. We should recognize Israel's right to defend itself. We should recognize that it's its own sovereign nation. And if the people in America don't like what Israel as a country is doing, our voices should be heard. But the country of America shouldn't be involved in what Israel does.
Yes.
And that seems to be more and more the stance that he's taking. And although in our discussions, I know that we don't necessarily see eye to eye in that point, I think what we see as America's role in all of this, we seem to kind of agree on that. And he's going in that direction. So I'm like, okay, again, I'm finding more reasons to like the guy. And then the thing happened. Sorry.
Yes.
So
I'm going to take a time to. I saw that in my feed, but there's so many things to watch that I didn't have a time to watch it. But send me a link just in case I cannot find it.
So much stuff from Vivek. That's the problem too. Is the guy is so dang prolific. He's on podcast after podcast. He's doing like, it's impossible to watch everything that he does.
Yes,
which is good and bad.
He really wants to make a record. He's like visited all the counties in that Ohio, I believe, like twice, which is a total record. Like for the town halls and stuff, he really is trying to reach the people. So yes, he's just about everywhere because the mainstream media at this point wrote him off. I don't know if you saw the CNN had a town hall, and they pretty much, Vivek was disqualified from being in the town hall. So now it's conveniently just DeSantis and Nikki Haley. Just working totally.
They also did they did an interview with Vivek, like his own kind of town hall before that. And then CNN pulled it down. But Vivek's campaign went ahead and reposted content from it.
Yes. Yeah.
And they have gotten cease and desist letters from CNN.
Yes.
When other politicians like DeSantis and Nikki Haley have clips from their CNN interviews on their stuff all the time and don't seem to be getting cease and desist letters. It's hilarious.
Yes.
Hey, Stop with the tail. That's annoying. Thank you. You weirdo.
But he,
One thing I'd like to just touch on that you mentioned that I find funny, because this is always it's a conversation that has come up a number of times in the past, and I always push back on it. But I think more and more I'm starting to understand, in the idyllic sort of view, that you're right, even if I couldn't get behind it initially. And that is this one world view that you have. We've talked about it so many times in the past, this idea that like the whole definition of countries seems so arbitrary and da-da-da-da-da. And I always push back that say, like America as a country that's defined is the area where our rights are the most enshrined. There are problems, but if there is a country anywhere on the planet that I can look at and say they've defined my rights as an individual, where I could take it to court and try and get my rights defended to some degree, America is it. We can do better, but America is it. And to think that you're going to wash away borders and let everyone else's opinion from all over the world further taint the idea of America from what the founding fathers had into whatever the future will hold for it is alarming to me. So there's like a reason why, to me, I'm like, no, borders are important. Definition of countries are important. Like I don't agree with you that we would want to dissolve all of these borders. And then we have more conversations. We talk about stuff. We talk about maybe a future of the world where all these countries are actually recognizing individual rights. And then suddenly I'm like, oh wait, Peter's idea is actually not that bad. But it comes with the assumption that you're talking about governments that universally across the world recognize that idea of individual rights. They don't conflate collective rights with individual rights. They enshrine the individual. They protect what it means to be that. They tell the government, you can't violate this person's rights. Other people can't violate that person's rights. And that person isn't allowed to violate anybody else's. As long as all that's copacetic, we're fine. And if every government on the planet was that kind of government, yeah, you're right. Borders don't matter. They don't matter. Overnight, they would cease to be an issue. It literally would be a line drawn on a map for no reason other than making easier to find a postcode. You know what I mean? Like, but that's not the world we live in. And that's why as soon as you say that kind of stuff about a one world thing, I get the hair on the back of my head goes like, because it sounds to me like you're thinking of like, I know what you're thinking of, but as soon as you say that kind of stuff, like you start thinking of like dystopian, like all those anti-utopian dystopian type novels talk about these like one world ideas where like once you get to the point where one body controls everything, well, they control everything. So there can't be like some bastion of freedom like America in the world, because the whole world is one thing and it's already gone off the rocker and everything's lost. And then America as a country becomes like the rebels fighting within. Anyway, I'm going off that. But
no, that's exact good point, Alistair. This is not something I planned like, oh, tomorrow we disband, we take the borders down or anything. Exactly the process, but the goal, future goal should be there. Like to unite the planet, because people are I traveled a lot. You traveled quite a bit too. When you talk to normal people, most normal people are kind of the same, share lots of the same things on, all over the planet. And they don't want the wars, and they don't want all these, things that they keep pushing on us. And I think most people, like normal people, have more things in common than differences. It's just for some reason the people in power are choosing not listening to people what they want. They just seem to be pushing their own agendas, and which sometimes can be terrifying. And so, yes, I would like to see this as a kind of future direction that where we should be thinking, not everybody saying, oh, I'm American and all this America, everything for America. You know what I mean? It's just that, like, you cannot discard, the rest of the, 97 whatever, 90% of the population, just by, saying that. So, yes.
You're exactly exactly what Vivek is saying that he so misunderstands is this like conflation of citizenship with like your culture.
So, in some way, Alistair, it's already happening, that unification, except not the way we want it. Is happening is that the government, imposing more and more control, thinking now about that, the currency, they want to do digital currencies, they can have a total control over the people. And I just, was actually learned today, which kind of really now, and I mean, we already know this is going on about, the governments, several, monitoring their people. And big businesses are doing the same, like Facebook and Google. They take all the information and collect that. Now there is a company that's using artificial intelligence and taking this to the whole new level. The name of the company is Synthetic, I can't even pronounce it correctly, and they somehow really now improve on that system that the artificial intelligence can collect in amazing speed information just about everything, from your facial recognition anywhere on the planet using satellite to read the license plate and immediately know the anywhere where there's a camera. And they taking down to the level where they partner with Microsoft, and Microsoft's going to give them access to their whole cloud information, so they can have all the information they need. They can monitor like even if you go to bathroom, they can monitor that. How often they go. And now we already saw it in the movies, but like for example, Subaru, in their my understanding is in their paperwork that you sign when you buy a vehicle, talk about they can even listen to your conversation that you have in the car. I mean, this is going to the level that's like even hard to understand, that we just keep allowing to go in that direction. But it's that unification for people in power controlling everything is already there. Except the way we don't want it. That's why I wish there would be a way to find for people to, to communicate and have run the planet, but not in a way how you're saying, when the rights of the people, individual rights, are kept.
It's frustrating because we live in an environment where the government has the ability to use that information in ways that they shouldn't be allowed to have that information, or even if they had that information, they shouldn't be able to do anything with it, because the government, again, in an objectivist, laissez-faire capitalist society, is delimited. It doesn't have the power to do those kinds of things, so there's nothing to worry about. It's awesome. We don't live in that world, sadly. So yeah, it's very concerning, particularly when you see companies like that partner with someone like Microsoft, who themselves partners with the federal government on tons of contracts. So it's a concerning connection of things to go on. As always, though, I just want to highlight how kind of awesome that stuff is, because it's easy to think of that kind of thing being used maliciously, but that kind of ability to siphon through information, to data mine, to do all those kinds of things is also fascinating, and it's going to do wonders for the human race. We just kind of need to allow, we need to live in an environment where we as individuals are protected, and then the innovative, creative side of people is left to flourish and think of how we can use these kinds of things really, really productively. Having an algorithm be able to identify aspects of human behavior very, very quickly, so that markets can adjust, so that innovations can adapt, it is a revolutionary and groundbreaking thing. And the example that I'll come up with was how long it took someone at 3M to think of putting adhesive sticky on the back of Post-it notes. we take it for granted. We've actually moved to an era in the world where people likely aren't really using Post-it notes anymore, but it was revolutionary to take a little piece of paper and put some pre-applied adhesive to the back of it. And the reason it was revolutionary, why 3M did so well with it, is because people had been selling little slips of paper, pre-cut small little things, for decades at that point, specifically for people in offices to be able to write little notes, attach it with a paperclip, do all those kinds of things. And there was an obvious knowledge in the market because Scotch tape would sell at incredible rates to the same offices that would buy insane amounts of these Post-it type style notes. A computer algorithm would have figured that out really fast. You know what I mean? Like, it would have put 2 and 2 together and say, well, why does the same office has no other need for Scotch tape, but when they buy these Post-it notes, buys an inordinate amount of Scotch tape? They must be sticking the Post-it notes to something. Oh Lord, let's revolutionize the market by pre-applying this Post-it, the sticky stuff on the back of the Post-it note, and blow 3M out of the water in terms of that innovation. And anyway, the reason I'm saying that is because, yes, it was genius for someone at 3M to think of that. And I don't want to take credit away from that person who thought of that. But we're overlooking the ability for simple logical connections like that to be derived by an algorithm that could make all of our lives so much better. So it's easy for us to look at something like chemistry and see the bombs that were made from it and think chemistry is bad when we're ignoring the fact that we feed everyone on the planet because of the same chemistry, right? Like, things aren't inherently bad. It's how it's how they're used, right? Like, money isn't bad. It can be used for good stuff. It can be used for bad stuff. Business, the term, isn't bad. There are bad businesses. There are good businesses. So that's all I want to like these algorithms and stuff in my professional capacity. I'm loving them. These tools are amazing. So it's hard for me to badmouth this kind of thing. But you bring up an amazing point when that same technology, when we live in a world where the government has not been delimited, or where companies seem to have acquired the authority to do things that I, as an individual, say, no, I disagree with that. You shouldn't be allowed to do that to me. And they have access to this data. You're right. That's really, really concerning.
Yeah, no, I exactly agree with you. If we could take all the technology that's out there and, focus it on betterment of humanity, that would be amazing. But unfortunately, I would say 90% of the usage of the technology is for war or control purposes, unfortunately. And that's what the problem lies. Yes. How we using that, the technology, for, what kind of purpose we using it. And there was something that I was just thinking about, and I just lost the train of thought. It was so important to mention in connection with that. I guess maybe, the part of it, I'm thinking, nobody asks, like, people have a discussion, like a broad discussion as a nation, like, what do we want with technology like that? Where it's heading, like when it comes to, such a, invasion of privacy or such a potential for abuse. There's no like a discussion. Just, again, a few people in the government decide, they make a rules, or they don't make a rule, they just do it, or they actually even defy the rules and go against the law doing some of that stuff. And nobody asks people, what people really want, what the kind of the direction with the technology should be, with, when it's so invasive, for people.
My only retort to that would be that should be what the free market does. That should be the place where we get to weigh in on what we do like and what we don't like, and how technology should and shouldn't be used. It's almost an antiquated idea at this point, because our consumer decisions, although still have a drastic impact, reference Bud Light, it doesn't have the impact that it really should. And yeah. Anyways,
Well, that,
it's about an
on that
hour.
note, I think
Going long.
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead. If you still had a thought, continue.
No, I was about the same thing. Maybe this is a good time to,
Okay.
because we put so many we put so many thoughts forward that when you really start thinking about them and take it seriously, which I so wish would happen, because sometimes when I keep meeting people, they not even able to discuss. They can't even comprehend those concepts or have even discussion about them or opinions about them. It kind of scares me when I see it, and I know I use the word scare, I think very too many times today. Um, but it's very serious, thought about, that people just not even have don't even think about those things. So right now, we brought so many, heavy thoughts forward just today that, probably should make your head spin for the rest of the day.
Right. And we'll both watch a bit more of the video. I think we should have just maybe next time, let's have like an in-depth conversation maybe about Vivek. I know we've talked about him a lot on the podcast. I also don't want people to misunderstand when I'm critical or when I say that I'm getting angry about what he's saying. That doesn't mean I don't think he's still the best candidate. So those two things can go hand in hand. I would take his opinion on citizenship over Nikki Haley being president any day of the week.
Yes.
But let's really dig into maybe next time a little bit more about, where there's that
Yes, that's a
interview.
good-
I'll send you
great
the
idea.
link. Maybe we can portion off at least a part of next week's podcast to kind of discuss a little bit more of the kind of our philosophical understanding of Vivek and his stance on things, so we can get to know the guy a little bit better. But otherwise, Prometheus says, I want to go for a walk, and then I want to go throw a ball and do all that fun stuff. And but that was another awesome episode. We'll see everybody next week. We've almost caught up on me editing stuff and Peter getting it out. So with any luck, maybe not this episode, but the next one, you guys will see the week we recorded. Maybe, possibly. Fingers crossed. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. See you next week.
Stay. Those. It's so funny if that unplugged my whole computer, just kicking my flip flop over there. It wouldn't have been funny. It would have been really frustrating, and I would have had to deal with it. But